Since the mid-1950s, organ donation had been regulated by individual hospitals. In order to give patients a greater chance at a donation, as well as to organize the transplant network, Congress passed the National Organ Transplant Act in 1984. The United Network for Organ Sharing initially developed the Organ Procurement and Transplant Network in 1986 and have maintained this network ever since. The network operates around a formula, necessary due to the simple matter of supply and demand. There are more people that need organs than those who can supply them, and only a formula can give all recipients a fair chance. Since its creation, the OPTN has changed vastly. For instance, the Patient Affairs Committee was created to give patients a say in policy changes. They also approved changes to the allocation policy, giving patients at immediate risk a higher chance of getting an organ. Lastly, the policy changed regarding recipient locations. While it was once extremely pertinent that the patient be in close proximity to the donor, a change passed in 2018 now prioritizes the patient's health by extending the donor radius immensely. For now, though, let's focus on some unchanged factors in the OPTN equation.
The third of the three main criteria to consider is the disadvantage that the recipient has in order for a transplant to work. Every person on Earth has specific antibodies in them that can possibly prevent them from using a certain percentage of the organs that are being donated. This percent can be as low as 0%, but can also go as high as numbers like 90% of the organs that are being donated. In order to keep the distribution of organ transplants fair and equitable, those who have more of a disadvantage, i.e. a higher percent, should have priority when it comes to organs that work for their bodies. This is where the idea of disadvantage comes from. The higher percent of people that they are not allowed to receive organs from, the higher their number of disadvantage is. A point system is also used for disadvantage in order to keep things fair and equitable. For every 10% of people that they are sensitized against or cannot receive from, they receive 1 point. We'll show some practice problems to help understand this better. Now looking at some practice problems, let's look at number 1. How many points would one get if they were sensitized to 70% of donations? Remember, for every 10% of the population that the recipient is sensitized against, they get 1 point. So in this situation, this person is sensitized to 70%. In order to find how many points that this person gets, you need to divide your percentage by 10. So divide 70 by 10. This will give you 7. So in this situation, the person would get 7 points. Let's look at another problem. How many points would one get if they were sensitized to 50% of all donations? Well, following our same process as above, if you have 50%, you divide that by 10 to get how many points you have, which would be 5. 5 points.
So, after all previous factors are considered, the patient with the highest amount of points receives the organ. Let's look at an example. For months waiting, we'll multiply 10 by the position of the patient over the total spots on the list. So in this example, it would be 5. Multiply the antigens matched by 2, and divide the percent sensitized by 10. This gives us the total points of 20, 21, 19, 14, and 15. Considering the total points, we can see that person B would get the organ. Now, what if 2 organs are available, but one is delayed? You'd think it would go to person A because they had the highest amount of points, but that's not necessarily the case. Because person B already got an organ, now we'll multiply by position over 4 because there are now only 4 positions on the list. Everything else will remain the same. We'll still multiply the antigens by 2, and we'll divide the percent sensitized by 10. Now the points will total up to 20, 20.5, 15, and 15.5. But now, person C would receive the organ. This change in recipients is called the priority paradox. Though this formula may optimize the transplant process, it is far from perfect. In reducing people to numerical values, hospitals can decide who is more deserving, yet only at the cost of the patient's humanity. While we can't deny that this formula is incredibly useful and necessary, the only way to ensure that all patients can get the organs they need is to increase the amount of organ donors. If you want to learn more about organ donations, visit organdonor.gov.